Hello, guys, and welcome to this very first YouTube live stream of a webinar. We're doing it for the first time. We did had one earlier, which was more of an interview, but this is the webinar live stream which we are doing. So, welcome to this stream. I just started this stream a couple of minutes earlier to make sure that everything is fine. Since we are new to this and we don't want to mess up with things, so just good to have a check and see if everything is fine. Well, yeah. So to start with, let me do a little bit of an introduction from my side. Well, my name is Ashutosh, and I'll be joined by Sneha as well in this particular webinar. And what we're doing is we're giving you a very high-level intro to Corda. So yeah, from a high level, it means it would not go into too much of details of the Corda, but will give you a sort of technical introduction from a developer point of view. And if you want more in-depth information and particularly want to understand how to write applications on Corda, we have something coming up for you next Thursday, which will be a proper bootcamp webinar. So feel free to join that. Yeah. So again, I'm Ashutosh, and I'm a developer evangelist. So is Sneha, and we're all both part of the R3 developer relations team, and we take care of anything and everything that relates to developers, right? So if you think of three priorities, it's which we take care of. It's basically developers, developers, and developers. So it's all about you guys. Yeah. So I guess it's time to start. Well, so before we start, let me just give you some of the information on how you could connect with us and how you could find more information about Corda. So we have something called as the Corda Public Slack, which is a community of all the Corda developers. So if you want to meet fellow Corda developers, feel free to join us. It's slack.corda.net. And you could find all the documentation at docs.corda.net. That's where you go. That's where you go if you want to have a look at all the Corda documentation. And guess what? We also have a free training site, so which just came up, I think, a few days ago, and it has a very good training on. It gives you like a brief intro to blockchain, and then it takes you through an entire journey of how to develop Corda apps on top using Corda. And if you are someone who likes to look at the code of how particularly something work, you have the GitHub repo over there, github.com/Corda. So it's open source, and yeah, it's available to everyone. So just go there, have a look what's going on inside the platform. So contact us at devrel@r3.com. That's the email ID that you could basically contact any of the developer relations member. And if you're a Twitter guy, we have our Twitter handle, which is Corda Blockchain. And also, if you want to tweet R3, it's inside R3. And do make sure you're using the hashtags #Corda and #R3. Well, that's it from the sort of housekeeping, I would say. And it's time to move in. Well, when you talk of something like a distributed ledger of blockchain, right? A lot of people would come up with different ideas and different opinions, but I'd like to share what we believe and why we developed Corda. So basically, you might understand that since we developed Corda, we must believe in DLTs. So we believe that DLT and blockchain are here to stay. And why not? Basically, it has so much to offer. It basically reduces cost. It brings down your time to market. There's so much of operational inefficiencies that you could see in the market. And if you have heard about this particular concept of what you see is what I see, right? So if I see the same data that you are seeing, and there is something a platform like Corda which can guarantee you that this particular fact is true. So basically, what you are removing whole lot of bottlenecks, if operational bottlenecks, like reconciliation cost and all these things. So overall, your time to market reduces, which reduces your cost and it brings more efficiencies in your business. And when something has so much to offer, why not? Why would businesses not want it? Why would businesses not use it? And in fact, as we speak, there are a lot of our partners and clients who are actually even starting to go live and then experimenting with it. And a lot of them are in pilot, and some are even live with Corda. So if you believe in blockchain, you're in the right place. We are here to stay. Blockchain is here to stay. BLT are also here to stay. Well, here's a little bit of a timeline or how Corda was developed. Well, I know we are developers, we don't really like history lessons, but don't worry, I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'll just take through some of the key points in history, so that you know how something was developed. If you are working on something you have gone through, or you're interested in something, you must know a little bit about what happened about it in the history. So that's all it will cover. Well, the entire thing, it started in September of 2014, when you could see it was the time when blockchain just started to gain all the popularity, right? And everyone wanted to spend their time or spend their money on blockchain and see how it could fit into their business models. And so did banks at that point of time. And David Rutter, who is a CEO, he was into the financial sector, and he was able to get 8 different representatives from 8 different banks and have them sit together and sort of see how blockchain could actually help the financial domain or the financial industry. But when they looked at all the different blockchains that were available at that point of time, none of them actually fit into the financial equation. None of them were able to solve the problems that the finance industry actually had. So a year later, they decided, they met again, and they decided, this time it was 9 banks. You could see all the big banks, all the names out there. And then at that point of time, they decided to basically come together and develop something which could really benefit the financial space, the finance industry. So it was in the same year when something called as the Architecture Working Group, or the DLG, Distributed Ledger Group, which later came to be known as the R3 Consortium, was formed to architect a solution, which basically later came to be known as Corda. And R3 Consortium, again, later became R3, which is a software company now, not anymore a consortium. Just 3 months later, in December 2015, the consortium had actually grown to 42 different banks from 9. And we just didn't look back after that. In November 2016, the first official Corda open source version was announced. And then in the meanwhile, we decided to have an enterprise offering for Corda. So the first Corda Enterprise, which was actually 3.0 to keep in sync with open source versioning, was launched in July of 2018, and it was really interoperable with Corda open source as well. And fast forward now, we have actually grown to more than 350 plus, not just financial, but multi-sector or multi-industry ecosystem. And we are supported by more than 350 different institutions from around the world. Well, that's a very brief overview of how Corda came into being. So just a very high level on some of the names that you could see. We talked about 350 different organizations, or different or cross industry collaboration which has been happening. So they are broadly into 4 categories. You could see the ecosystem participants were more like the member banks, which initially joined, and then we have ISVs and SIs. So ISVs are people who develop Corda apps. They develop their own products on top of Corda. And the SIs are basically your delivery partners who deliver or who build, who basically deliver services to clients who want to develop on top of Corda. And finally, we have some more infrastructure providers, like you could see AWS and these guys who provide infrastructure for running Corda. Well, that's much of an introduction. Let's move into more of the technical things, right? So let's start with the fact that why we developed Corda. What was the problem that we were talking about when we basically looked at the traditional blockchains? So to explain this, if you see any of the public blockchains like Ethereum or Hyperledger, Ethereum or Bitcoin, basically, which we talk as the blockchain version 1 or 2, or the traditional blockchain. The problems that they had was there was no identity. All you had was a pseudo-anonymous key. So you do not know whom you're transacting with. Very difficult to do business if you don't know whom you're transacting with. And the lack of privacy. These are public. The data that you put in is basically available to everyone that's out there. It's not really easy to have such kind of a model when you're doing business. You need to have private data. You need to have data that you could keep confidential. And then the problem of speed, they lack in speed and scalability because of the fact that each and every node that's there was actually involved in performing or processing transactions, which limited the speed of these blockchains, which was actually a problem when you think of something like a financial space or any business which process a lot of information, which process a lot of transactions. And then finally, the problem of integration. Think of any enterprise software, it has to integrate with multiple different other systems. But these blockchains, the traditional ones, which we figured out had a problem with integration. They could not really, the assets that you create, they're actually trapped within the silos, and you can't really actually integrate with external systems, which was again a problem if you want to use them in any enterprise grade solution. So that gave birth to Corda, which we call as the third generation blockchain, and it's just not a blockchain; it's more of a DLT. And why we call it third generation is because it basically takes all the benefits, or it takes all the benefits that they are with the traditional blockchains, and then try to utilize those to create something that could be more helpful for businesses. So we call it as a blockchain for business, and we'll see how we do that when we go into the next slides. So it's applicable to all industries. You might have heard that even I talked about finance in the beginning, but when you look at it today, we have not just done it on finance, but also it's applicable to multiple other industries. That's where I say we have an ecosystem of more than 350 participants, and those are across industries, not just finance. They've grown from finance to being a more of a general purpose blockchain right now. Well, so moving on, I'll talk, or basically I'll move in. I'll pass it over to Sneha, who will talk about more in depth of how the technical things of Corda are all of them sit together. So yeah, over to you, Sneha.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Ashutosh. That was really helpful. Thanks a lot. So, guys, let's move on. And now it's going to be only Corda. And now let's deep dive more into Corda. So, looking at this slide, let's talk a bit about Corda now. So Ashutosh explained how traditional blockchain networks are structured, and clearly, this does not meet the needs of real enterprise business, right? Because in real enterprise business, you actually need to know who the other counterparty is. You randomly cannot transact with pseudonymous keys, right? So to meet the needs of business, Corda networks are completely different, like they're completely structured and architectured differently. So in Corda, before you join the network, each and every party it undergoes a KYC process, and a digital certificate or an identity certificate is issued to any party who wishes to join the network. Upon joining the network, what they do is all the parties they publish these certificates, which indicate the legal name, some other information like IP address, the public key. So this information, which is there in the certificates, this is published to all the parties within the Corda network, and this is how the parties can interact with each other. In Corda, unlike public blockchains, data here is shared only on a need to know basis. And the data is not broadcasted to the entire network. So only the parties who are involved in the transaction will, as such, get the copy of the data. Unlike public blockchains, where the data is transacted and broadcasted to the entire network, right? So each and every party has a copy of the data. But in Corda, only the parties involved in the transaction will have the copy of the data. Now, since this data is not broadcasted to the entire network and it is shared only on a need to know basis, the heavy proof of work consensus algorithms, which are used, or let's say mining and all these algorithms which are used in the public blockchains to achieve consensus, is really not required in Corda. And in Corda, consensus you can think of like the consensus can be achieved at a node level, and consensus is not actually required at a network level. Again, since consensus is at a node level and not at a network level, and again, because data is shared only on a need to know basis, so because of all these facts, finality is actually instantaneous, and you do not really have to wait for certain confirmations, just as we have to wait in the public blockchains. Again, the data which is shared with the peers is always shared on safe channels, on TLS encrypted channels. Because of this, you can think of the communication is absolutely safe with Corda. It is also very easy to integrate with legacy business applications. You can say because of this, what happens is overall, this leads to effectively, it increases the speed, it increases the performance, and you can also easily scale your Corda app. Again, as Ashutosh mentioned, Corda is open source. So we get a lot of community contributions from the community. And usually, the roadmap of Corda is completely decided by the community, its partners, and developers like you who use Corda. So I would just go ahead and access the Git repo and yes, start contributing as well. So yes, let's move on to the next slide now, where let's talk a bit about Corda Network. Yeah. Ashutosh, can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So this picture, if you look at this picture, it depicts a kind of a Corda network. Corda network, or rather the Corda network, is a publicly available internet of Corda nodes, I can say. And these are operated, this network is completely operated by the network participants who are part of this network. So this network, which is the Corda network, it went live actually in December 2018. And currently it is governed by an independent non-for-profit foundation. So if you look into this, the green dots here, they represent individual Corda nodes. Few operate on Corda open source and few can operate on Corda enterprise. The blue dot which you see is the doorman, or we rather call it the identity manager. He's the guy or the entity who's actually responsible to perform the KYC checks for all the parties who wish to join the network. So once the KYC process is done for these legal identities who wish to join the network, doorman then issues them digital certificates, and then they get an entry to this network. And then they become visible to other nodes within the network via the network map service. And then they can interact easily with each other. So this is how the process by which legal entities can join the Corda network. So what do you think? What does this offer to you? This offers complete interoperability. The nodes can exchange data and assets via secure internet layer. So eventually, think of it like many networks will become a part of this global network. So let's say that we'll have eventually a hospital network, which is talking to an insurance network, and which in turn is talking to a reinsurance network. And so this is how the data can easily be, you can say, exchanged, transferred between these different networks, which are part of the Corda network. So we just spoke about Corda network on a very high level. Now let's go more into the detail. So let's move on to the next slide. In this slide, what you can see. So in this slide, what we can see is we can see a Corda network, and there are three legal parties, which is Titan, Bay, and Acme. These are the guys. These guys must have undergone a KYC process, and then the doorman or the identity manager must have issued digital certificate to these guys. And this is how they're now part of a Corda network, and now they're ready to transact and interact with each other. Now, one obvious question will be, if data is only distributed on the network only on a need to know basis, how do we prevent double spends? So when I mean double spend, what I mean is, so how do we prevent someone from transferring, let's say, some digital asset to one party and then turning around and, let's say, also transferring the same asset to another party at the same time? So this is what double spend is. And in public blockchain, what happens is this is achieved by maintaining a global ledger, because each and every participant has the copy of the data. Because of this, each and every party knows what is happening exactly in the entire network. And because of this, each and every party participates in the consensus, and hence double spend is easily achieved in public blockchains. But in Corda, double spends, you can say, are prevented using notary. So notary, there are different algorithms which you can use for notary. Again, notary algorithms are completely pluggable. So depending on the use case, you can either use BFT or Raft implementations. So ideally, what notary does is, I'm not going to go into much detail, but from a very high level, what notary does is it just maintains a table where it saves the hash of the asset being consumed or spent already. So what notary will do is notary will simply go and check if this asset has already been consumed by someone or not. When I say it has been, notary checks whether this asset is consumed by someone or not, I mean that it goes and checks in the table whether an entry exists for this particular asset. If an entry exists, then somebody has already consumed this asset, and then a guy is trying to do a double spend. And in this situation, the notary simply will reject the transaction. So this is how notary achieves, or you can say it handles double spend issues. Again, the finality is achieved only after the notary signs the transaction. Okay, so now moving on more to the next slide. So till now we spoke about, so yeah, this slide basically, now what does this slide look to you? So we have set up till now, we've spoken about the Corda network. To assume that we've set up the Corda network, we had the doorman issue digital certificate to these three parties. So these three parties are also set up. We also have the notary set up, which would take care of the double spend issues. Now, at the end of the day, what are we doing and what are we actually trying to achieve? Right? You might have this question, right? So at the end of the day, what we all of us are trying to do is to make sure that what you see is what I see. So at the end of the day, what we all of us want, or why at the end of the day we are using blockchain, or why we are using Corda, is because we want to make sure that what you see is what I see. So let's take a simple example. So in this situation, let's say that Acme and Titan, they enter into a deal where Acme, let's say that Acme wants to purchase a car, and let's say that he wants to get the ownership transfer to his name. So as of now, without Corda, let's imagine how this would be executed. So they will execute this deal. Excuse me. So they will execute this deal. And this information they will store in their heads, right, as of now. Now, just imagine how can we model this kind of process or this kind of situation or this kind of deal on Corda. So in Corda, this can be modeled using three very basic simple things, which is the states, the contract, and the flow. So these are just the three basic simple things which are needed when you want to deploy a Corda app, or you want to develop, and rather you want to develop an application on Corda. So let's just take a look at what kind of steps can be done to achieve this in Corda, or how can we model this in Corda using states, contract, and flows. The very first thing what will be done is the Titan. Let's say Titan will create a transaction. When I mean transaction, I mean a proposal. So imagine Titan will create a transaction or a proposal in which he will propose to Acme, and he will say that I want to transfer this vehicle to you. He will, while he'll create this proposal, he will also attach the contract, which might have been agreed between Titan and Acme. So this contract will have all the constraints, or you can say all the rules around the car transfer decided by both the parties. So what will happen is ideally the Titan, what happens is Titan will actually execute this contract on his side. And if he thinks that the contract succeeds, and if he thinks he's happy, if he thinks that all the contract and the rules which are written in the contract or which are pre-decided with Acme are fulfilled, then what Titan will do is he will simply sign the transaction with his key. Once he signs this transaction or this proposal, he will send this proposal, signed proposal, to the other party, which is Acme. Acme will also do the same thing. He will also execute this contract again on his end, And again, if he thinks everything is good, the contract is executed successfully, and if he thinks he's happy, he will also simply sign the transaction. Now, this signed proposal, which is signed by both the parties, and till this point of time, since both the parties have signed, we can simply assume that both the parties are quite happy and they want to actually execute this transaction or this proposal. So this signed proposal is then sent to notary to check for double spend. If notary also thinks that there's no double spend, notary will also sign this transaction on this proposal, and then this proposal gets executed and recorded, or rather this information, you can say, in this transaction or proposal gets recorded on both the counterparties database. So each and every party who joins the network has a database associated with it. Okay, keep this in mind. So this, so whatever I told you right now, how does this fit into states, contract, and flows? So this series of steps, which we just spoke, is actually encapsulated in a flow in Corda. Corda also provides many inbuilt flows to perform tasks like, let's say you want to sign the transaction or you want to store the information on both the parties. So for all these things, Corda has certain inbuilt flows which you can readily use. Now, the contract rules which we defined, they will go as a part of contract in Corda. And the information or the fact, you can say, which the parties are interested to save in the database. So let's say that the parties like the Acme and Titan are interested to save, let's say, vehicle number, what was the date of transfer, how much cost was associated with the transfer, and all these things which the parties are interested, or the facts which the parties are interested to save in the database, will go as a part of state. So Corda maintains the blockchain guarantee that for each shared fact between two or more parties, those parties will all see the exact same version of that fact. So this is completely handled by Corda. So there is, because of this, what happens is eventually there is no need for any party, right, to get to maintain its own system of record, right? And there is actually no need for each and every party to let's say engage in costly reconciliation processes like the way it is required right now with traditional database architectures, right? So yeah, this is from a very high level, these three things actually form something called as a Corda app, which is the states, contract, and flows. Yeah, so we spoke pretty much on states, contracts, and flows on a very high level. Yeah, so now let's talk a bit again from a very high level on Corda node. So Corda is actually often released in two versions. It is usually first, what happens is usually not usually, actually every time the open source version is released first, and this is usually followed by enterprise version. So there aren't any actual functional differences, I would say, between open source and enterprise. But yes, there are features like HA or performance. All these kind of features are added more in enterprise version. Again, as I mentioned, you can always go and take a look at the open source version on GitHub. Again, there are a lot of samples as well on GitHub. So go and take a look at them, try them out. One more thing to note is Corda platform is completely written in Kotlin. But for writing your Corda apps, you can write your Corda apps in any JVM compatible language. So you can write it in Kotlin or you can write it in Java, whichever suits you. So each Corda node, as I mentioned, has a database associated with it. So Corda uses an RDBMS to store the ledger. Also, as I mentioned, the Corda nodes, this Corda node is kind of a magic box. You can imagine this to be a magic box where things like messaging. So when I say messaging, I mean that the way messages are sent to each other, the way nodes transact with each other on TLS encrypted channels, the way the queues are implemented on both the nodes ends. So all these things is completely abstracted for you. So again, storage or peer discovery storage, I mean the way the node connects to the database, peer discovery, the way the nodes interact with each other or discover each other. the way data is distributed after achieving consensus or after finality, the way data is distributed to all the nodes within the system. Concurrency, I mean, how multiple flows can be started at the same time. This disaster recovery, or let's say signing, how the transactions are signed, and all of this is completely abstracted for you for the Corda, by the Corda node. So in this way, the node servers, you can say that they actually, you can say they hide all the horrors of distributed system, cryptography, and database management from the user. So yeah, that's pretty much um, about how Corda nodes abstracts away the complexity of updating the ledger. So yeah, that brings us actually to the end of our session. So for the next boot camp, so guys, we in this June, in this month, we are going to host multiple boot camps on every Thursday. So our next boot camp is on June 11th, which is basically going to focus on the Corda boot camp, and this will be followed by accounts and tokens on next Thursdays. The timing will be same at 2 p.m. So hope to see you guys next time as well. We would of course, since considering the time, we would take a look at your comments or your questions in the chat, and we'll get back to you on the chat channel itself. Thank you for your attention and thank you for joining.